Come on down to Valiant Video, where our stuff is up to snuff. Ask about our VIP program, where you can unlock a treasure trove of filth and depravity. Like Pixie's greatest hits, over 6 hours of the most vile kills ever caught on camera. Sign up today and get a sneak peek at Born Again, starring death row inmate James Earl Cash. And don't forget, rewind or... Ooh! Valiant Video is located in Carcer City Mall in the East Los Alamos. Membership may cause mild existential dread and in rare cases fatal encounters with masked maniacs. We are not responsible for nightmares, moral decline, or sudden urges to slaughter your family.
In the aftermath of a tragedy, it's not uncommon for people to shift some of the blame to provocative media. In the wake of A Clockwork Orange's release in 1971, the film's vivid portrayal of violence was cited as an influence by some who committed similar acts. Decades later, following the Columbine High School shooting in 1999, the shooter's obsessions with Doom and Marilyn Manson were singled out as contributing factors. Video games, as one of the newer forms of media, have often been targeted as a scapegoat for violent behavior, largely due to their rapid rise in popularity and widespread misconceptions about their impact. Critics argue that immersive, violent video games can desensitize players or even encourage aggression, despite a lack of conclusive evidence linking gaming to real-world violence. This view is often fueled by sensationalist headlines and misunderstandings about the interactive nature of games, overlooking the reality that the vast majority of players can clearly separate fictional on-screen violence from real-world actions. As a result, video games are often unfairly blamed, creating a narrative that oversimplifies the causes of violence and stigmatizes an art form enjoyed by millions of people. When I was younger, I wasn't really allowed to play violent video games, at least not at my mom's house. Every once in a while, I would go to hang out with my older cousins who had tons of rated M games. And one specific evening, probably in October or something, we sat down on the couch and I was introduced to Rockstar North for the first time. The Vice City opening montage is one of the most nostalgic video game memories I have. The music, the colors, the style. I love Vice City. I think this game was responsible for me being obsessed with the 80s for 4 years. After that though, there was another game I had vague memories of. Something about a character waking up and being forced to escape some unspeakable horror. The images were burned into my brain for years. I had never even played it myself. I was just a passive observer, and for some reason, it haunted me. It felt like something I shouldn't have known about. Something I shouldn't have seen. Something forbidden. The year is 2003.
Pockets ain't empty, cuz.
Rockstar North had just released Grand Theft Auto Vice City a year prior, but they were already putting the final touches on their newest title. Rockstar had made quite a name for themselves with parents and politicians, thanks to the content found in the Grand Theft Auto games. Instead of toning down the violence, Rockstar would double down and develop a brutal stealth game focusing on violent executions. Not only was the violence extremely explicit, but it was nearly unavoidable. Some describe the game as a murder simulator, fearing it would instruct impressionable teens on effective ways to kill. This game, of course, is Manhunt. Now, before we could join Cash on this violent escapade, there is a small bit of work we need to do to get the game in a playable state on PC. The version currently uploaded to Steam, right now, contains an anti-piracy measure that prevents you from progressing in the game. If you download MHNoDRM, it will fix the faulty anti-piracy measures. Now, Rockstar should really fix this themselves, but I don't think they necessarily care. Once again, the community comes in clutch. Now, let's dig into the depravity.
It looks like this goes all the way to the top. I can't trust anyone, least of all the police, and time's running out. I've got to get the one piece of evidence that will expose Starkweather without a shadow of a doubt. Footage and testimony of a man who was executed by the state 5 hours ago.
During Cash's scheduled execution, we come to find out the lethal injection he was given was merely a sedative. He wakes up in an abandoned building with a man named the Director giving him instructions through an earpiece. Under the guise of helping Cash escape, the Director talks him through murdering gang members in various parts of Carcer City. It's revealed later on that the Director is actually a film mogul named Lionel Starkweather. His company, Valiant Video Enterprises, produces snuff films for an underground ring of buyers. Starkweather is voiced by legendary actor Brian Cox, who you may know from Braveheart, Super Troopers, and dozens of other projects. Another name that stuck out to me on the cast list was Kate Miller, who has done a bunch of voice work since the release of this game. But, most importantly, she played Debbie on C-Lab 2021, one of my favorite Adult Swim shows. Super underrated, not enough people talk about it, especially the theme song. C-Lab at the bottom. Oh. The lengths that Rockstar goes to in order to immerse players in their worlds are impressive, and Manhunt has two excellent examples of this. Before the video game industry made a slow and painful transition to digital, buying a video game used to be an experience. I'm not just talking about the act of going to the store and picking it up, but the game itself, the physical case, the artwork printed on the CD. All things that have been lost to time. Because unfortunately, even if you were to pick up a physical copy of a new game today, what you're buying is just a license. Most, if not the entire game, needs to be downloaded on your console to actually play it. So instead of opening a case and seeing a thick, nicely tucked in booklet, you're greeted with a slip of paper, if anything at all. I can make an entire video about the work and care that goes into creating a good companion manual for a game. Some were straight to the point and gave you the controls, set some expectations, but some went a lot deeper than that, and Rockstar was well known for having good manuals. So it's not a surprise that the Manhunt manual takes the form of an in-universe brochure for Valiant Video. It breaks down every aspect of the game from the controls to the missions to the hunters, and does so in a way that makes it fun, even including a sign-up form for aspiring hunters. A job you probably don't want. It's stuff like this that really makes me miss this era of gaming. On the manual, you may notice a URL. Rockstar actually set up a website for Valiant Video that was active for most of the 2000s. It included a forum where users could comment on their favorite scenes and discuss their own tapes, and a shop where people could purchase some of the weapons from the game. Not really, but it did offer a neat look into the in-game universe. Today, if you were to visit the site, it actually contains a petition for Manhunt 3. The site now appears to be run by a fan who purchased the domain after Rockstar let it expire. Looks like somewhere around 2013. Cash spends the first few levels learning the ropes while stacking up bodies of the game's first gang, the Hoods. The bloodbath begins with Cash executing, this dumb fuck with a plastic bag.
Look, Pib, I know it's our job to help this guy and everything, but I think this guy's a lost cause. He's obviously made up his mind. Why don't we just cut our losses and get out of here?
This is how we're introduced to the scoring system. When you sneak up behind an enemy and hold the attack button, there's a reticule that changes colors depending on how long you stay within range with the attack button held down. This meter indicates how violent the execution is going to be and how many points you'll get for that kill. Executions cannot be done with your bare hands. You have to be holding a weapon. At the end of each level, you're given a star rating based on how many points you've racked up throughout the level. The goal is to get a 5-star rating by stacking as many violent kills as you can. Manhunt has 4 different weapon classes, separated by color. Yellow weapons aren't actually weapons, they're throwables that Cash can use to distract or lure enemies. Green weapons offer silent executions but are a one-time use. Blue weapons can be used for multiple executions, but are louder and can attract unwanted attention. Red weapons are heavy. Using them in an execution will almost certainly alert nearby hunters. I thought this system added a lot of depth to how you approach situations. More often than not, I would just take the risky execution kill and then run away and hide to set up another. But having the option to perform silent executions comes in handy when hunters are close to each other. The hand-to-hand combat in Manhunt isn't great. It's very sluggish, and even a one-on-one fight could drain a good bit of your health. Here's the thing though, I don't think that affects the gameplay negatively at all, because Manhunt isn't an action game. You're not supposed to be able to take down a group of people head-on. Weapons can give you an edge, but you're better off just backing down. Manhunt is about lurking in the shadows and striking at the opportune moment. If you ever want to make it out of Carcer City alive, you're gonna have to get used to running away and hiding. Manhunt's stealth system is intricate, but well balanced. There are a lot of factors that go into whether or not the enemy is aware of your presence. The visibility mechanics aren't super realistic, and are very player-sided. If the player breaks line of sight and dips into a shadow, the enemy will completely lose track of them. There have been moments where enemies were face to face with me, but as long as they didn't run into me, I was completely invisible to them. The audio mechanics add a bit more difficulty, as one wrong move means any enemy within earshot will come running. The hunters are some of the most memorable characters in Manhunt, with each group having a distinct style and personality. You could pretty easily identify the hunters by their outfits, weapons, or voice lines, with some being a bit more fucked up than others. Each group patrols a different part of Carcer City, and their levels can be grouped together kinda like chapters. Alan Davidson was the lead character designer for Manhunt, and he did a fantastic job creating unique and memorable characters, especially the mask designs. The fact that people are still cosplaying the Smileys after all this time is a testament to their design. The first group of hunters that Cash encounters are called the Hoods. Described as a bunch of disorganized thugs for hire, the Hoods most likely got into this for the bounty on Cash's head, although they never really stood a chance against Cash. It's more likely that Starkweather hired them to be fodder for the start of the film, as the Hoods are the only group in the game to not get any sort of firearms. One thing I really love about Manhunt is how much personality is put into these characters. The hunters all have interesting voice lines, giving you a bit of insight into their lives outside of the film. This is a great tactic to try and humanize these characters. It's interesting that we learn a lot more about the NPCs than we do Cash. The Skins are a group of white supremacists and neo-Nazis that lurk around the junkyard. It's funny to me that Starkweather encourages Cash to brutally kill these guys more than any other gang, considering he captured a death row inmate and forced him to participate in a snuff film, but racism is where he draws the line. It's interesting to see the little things that people grasp for to try and convince themselves that they have morals. The junkyard levels are where you get access to your first firearm, if you can call it that. The nail gun gives you a small taste of what's to come with ranged weapons, and it does a pretty decent job. The junkyard also features one of the most annoying segments in the entire fucking game. Anyone who's played Manhunt knows exactly what I'm talking about. The cranes. Dear God. Every time you get on a crane, you get swarmed by a bunch of enemies, and you could drop a fridge on them to kill them, which is fun, but it's not easy, and I died more times than I'm willing to admit the first time I encountered this segment. It's easily one of the most stressful parts of the game. Next up, we head over to the Carcer City Zoo to face off against the War Dogs. A group of veterans, survivalists, and soldiers for hire led by Ramirez. Having starred in a film himself, Ramirez has gained the trust of Starkweather and has been seen a few times throughout the game by this point, giving orders to other gangs on how to hunt cash down. After being introduced to some of the new weapons like the Trank gun, the game adds its first level gimmick. It's revealed that the War Dogs have taken Cash's family hostage, and they'll be executed if Cash alerts any guards. This adds an extra layer to the stealth mechanic because now a screw-up means a dead family member. I love the way this was introduced because we don't know any of these people. There are no stakes here other than us knowing that they're Cash's family. I think this was an intentional choice to reinforce the idea that Cash has been disconnected from his family for so long, and the only reason he cares to save them is because the path he took in his life got them in this situation. The War Dogs are also the first group of hunters that we meet that have actual firearms. The inclusion of guns in Manhunt feels out of place at first. We go from these very drawn out, up close and personal kills to putting multiple guys down with quick headshots. I'm very well aware that playing this game on PC does give me a bit of an advantage since I can aim with the mouse, so I'm not going to comment on how easy it was to level entire groups of enemies in seconds. But I literally just did that. Never mind. The gunplay in this game does a decent job at splitting the levels up. I like the slow, stealth sections, but sometimes you do just need a good, mindless cover shooter. After wiping out most of the War Dogs, we move over to the Carcer City Mall. Starkweather mentions that he has a film for Cash to watch. Cash just needs to grab the tape and the camcorder. The only problem is, the mall is crawling with the next group of hunters, called the Innocents, a well-armed and organized gang of Latino Satanists that are also maybe pedophiles? Don't get me wrong, the skins had some fucked up shit going on, but this is a whole new level. I mean, look at this guy. The mall is the first level that makes Manhunt feel like a straight-up action game. There aren't really any segments here that don't involve ducking behind cover and shooting. Which is fine, like I said, it does help keep the game interesting, but it's a very harsh contrast to everything we've played up to this point. The guns in Manhunt take up either the blue or red slot, depending on what type of gun it is. The revolver, light, and heavy handguns, as well as the submachine gun are blue, while the shotguns and rifles take up the red slot. During levels that mix shooting segments with stealth, it's best to keep one slot for a firearm and one slot for a melee weapon. After blasting your way through these Satan worshippers, it's revealed to you via good old VHS that your family was murdered anyway. I don't think this should come as a surprise considering how fucked up Starkweather is, but this part kinda got to me. I went through so much effort to set them free, just for them to be killed off anyway. This really plays to the themes of nihilism present in Manhunt. It's bleak, and it doesn't care. Like the horror exploitation films of the 80s and 90s, you go into these things expecting the worst humanity has to offer, and you get it. It's yet another example in Manhunt that the cycle of violence never really ends. The rest of the Innocence levels don't stand out as much, with the exception of escorting around the Tramp, voiced by Mark Morales, who I know as Hector Salamanca from Breaking Bad. Early on, it appears that the Tramp was going to play a bigger role, but those sections appear to have been cut. After we finish off these levels, we're kidnapped by Starkweather's paramilitary group called Cerberus and taken to Darkwoods Penitentiary. The Smileys are a gang full of mentally deranged psychopaths who were once prisoners at Darkwoods Penitentiary. Sometime after Cash was taken to be executed, the prisoners broke out and killed the guards, making a sort of Arkham Asylum style situation. This is where I noticed a ramp in the game's difficulty. I found myself dying a lot more than usual while trying to navigate these cell blocks. Other than that, there really isn't much else interesting to say about these levels. There are stealth segments as well as shooting segments. I'm not gonna lie, at this point the game did start to feel a little repetitive. These levels end with you chasing a guy in a giant white rabbit costume, and you kill him to get the key to escape. Cash isn't free for long as he's ambushed by Ramirez and the War Dogs for round 2 of hide and seek. The conclusion of the mission sees Cash killing Ramirez, and while it's not confirmed that the War Dogs are wiped out, their head has been cut off. During his escape from the level, Cash runs into the reporter from earlier in the game who's doing a story about Starkweather's snuff ring. The only problem is, the evidence is at her apartment, and the police are on Starkweather's payroll. This is another escort mission, but it's not too difficult. Just make sure you hit your headshots and you'll be fine. In fact, the next few levels are very firearm heavy. Once the reporter has her stuff, it's off to finding Starkweather and ending this film once and for all. After mowing through the Carcer City Police Department, you get caught anyway. That is until Cerberus comes and kills all the cops and takes you for themselves. This part was odd to me because Starkweather watched me kill hundreds of people up to this point, and yet he gives the order for Cerberus to bring me directly to his mansion. Okay. The mansion levels are decent, but nothing much to talk about. The real interesting stuff is the fat man in the pig mask. Pigsy is described as being a cannibalistic mass murderer who starred in Starkweather's films prior to Cash. During the events of the game, Pigsy is chained up in the attic and being fed corpses of the game's many victims. Once Cash is transported to the mansion, Pigsy breaks out and wreaks havoc with his chainsaw, killing many Cerberus guards. Pigsy eventually confronts Cash, who prefers the hands-free approach, and sends Pigsy plummeting to his death. Then there's this pretty tough section where you need to take out the Cerberus guards with Pigsy's chainsaw, but once you get through it, it's time to cut Starkweather up. It's pretty ironic that Starkweather ended up being killed by the weapon that had made him so much money. Manhunt has a pretty fucked up sense of humor, but that's where the game ends. The reporter breaks the story and Cash makes his escape, his fate left up to interpretation. Manhunt would go on to become a cult classic, gathering tons of passionate fans since its release. It was the game that parents didn't want you to have, the game that politicians would point to when they wanted to make a point about violent video games. It was taboo, violent, disgusting, nihilistic, other adjectives. Despite that, the people that love Manhunt continued to love it. As I stated earlier, visiting valiant-ent.tv will now direct you to a petition for Rockstar to develop Manhunt 3. Manhunt fan and filmmaker Matt Simpson even worked on a short pilot for a Manhunt web series. That would unfortunately not get off the ground as Matt was not able to get the approval of Rockstar. Nevertheless, it shows the dedication of the fanbase. Unfortunately for Rockstar, shortly after the release of Manhunt, their critics would have new ammunition when a young teen named Warren LeBlanc would stab his friend Stefan Pekira and beat him to death with a hammer. Stefan's parents claim that LeBlanc was obsessed with Manhunt and tried to reenact the violence he had seen on the screen. The truth behind the murder would soon be revealed to be gang-related, and there's conflicting information about which of the two actually owned the game. But regardless, the damage had been done, and Manhunt would forever have that tragedy attached to its legacy. Manhunt was ultimately banned in several countries, and to this day, remains a highly controversial title. It seems that Rockstar's take on a horror game would prove to be their most controversial title to date. With obscene amounts of gore and depravity, Manhunt set a new standard for violent video games. One that would eventually be met by future titles, but there's just something about Manhunt. The grim setting and plot, the grotesque sound design, the faceless gangs hunting you throughout the city. Manhunt feels like a nightmare. And that's not by accident. Sam Houser wanted a horror game, and the talented team at Rockstar North delivered. I think Manhunt aged fairly well, with the exception of the Steam release still being broken. The game is fun, and while it can be frustrating at times, the payoff almost always feels worth it. I've heard good things about the sequel and will check it out eventually. I would like to see Rockstar return to the series at some point. Now that things like Terrifier are hitting mainstream audiences, I think it's only a matter of time. That's it for my time with Manhunt. Thanks for watching.